And we'll do an example of that right now, what you need to do on the aparts. Let me get you, hold on, tell you exactly what it is on Mind that's due on the 1st. It is chapter 16, Interactive Story Reflection. And then you also have the aparts worksheet document analysis due on the 1st. Okay, so I'm going to bring up a document and then we'll go through it together and do the parts, all right, answer the questions for it so you'll have a better idea of what you need to do and have turned in by Monday. Let me go ahead and pull up a document and I'll share it with you. Now we're going to do a document that was not on your package, so you don't have to worry about not being able to do it. It's a pretty short one. It's a poem. We're going to do Rudyard Kipling's The White Man's Burden, and we'll discuss that. It must be like the last one on this list. Yep. Okay. Let me share it with you. Okay, so, right, there's the document. It's called The White Man's Burden. It's written by Rudyard Kipling in 1899. Okay, and we'll go through that in a little bit. And it mostly has to do with America's war in the Philippines, but you don't have to know a lot about that to be able to analyze this poem. Okay, so first off, it's important to note that Rudyard Kipling is a famous British author and poet. He lived in India as a child while his father was in the British service. Um, and of course, he has a very imperialist viewpoint. Okay, so I'll put it on the screen and I'll read it to you as well. Take up the white man's burden, send forth the best you breed. Go bind your sons to exile to serve your captives' need. To wait in heavy harness, unfluttered folk and wild, your new-caught sullen peoples, half devil and half child. Take up the white man's burden in patience to abide, to veil the threat of terror, and check the show of pride. By open speech and simple, 100 times made plain, to seek another's profit, and work another's gain. Take up the white man's burden, the savage wars of peace. Fill full the mouth of famine, and bid the sickness cease. And when your goal is nearest, the end for others sought, watch sloth and heathen folly, bring all your hope to naught. Take up the white man's burden, no tawdry rule of kings, but toil of serf and sweeper, the tale of common things. The ports ye shall not enter, the roads ye shall not tread, go make them with your living, and mark them with your dead. Take up the white man's burden, and reap his old reward, the blame of those ye better, the hate of those ye guard. The cry of hosts ye humour, slowly toward the light, why brought ye us from bondage, our loved Egyptian night? Take up the white man's burden, ye dare not stoop to less, nor call too loud on freedom to cloak your weariness. But all ye cry or whisper, by all ye leave or do, the silent sullen peoples shall weigh your gods and you. Take up the white man's burden, have done these with childish days, the lightly proffered laurel, the easy ungrudged praise, comes now to search your manhood, through all the thankless years, cold-edged and dear-bought wisdom, the judgment of your peers. Okay. So, what are your thoughts? Don't all of you speak at once.
Can we reread it? Can you reread it again?
I can't reread it, but I will put it back up there.
All right.
There you go. All right, so let's start talking about the author, right? For this poem, we know the author is Rudyard Kipling, and the introductory paragraphs, not the actual poem itself, tells you the time in which he wrote it. Okay, so author, place, and time are pretty self-explanatory, especially in those first couple of paragraphs. Tells you it's 1899, tells you he's British, he's an imperialist. He's writing it about the American expansion in the Philippines. I mean, that's what's happening at the time period. That may not necessarily be why he's writing it, but that is the time period that he is writing it. So again, author, place, and time tends to be simple. Pretty straightforward and how to do that. Now, if we go, let's see, flip over to our, oops, I'm on the wrong screen. Okay, place and time, how might this affect the meaning of the source? So in this point, you could talk about the fact that America is making the jump to an empire, right? It's no longer just manifest destiny, ocean to ocean, expansion into the West. The war in the Philippines is now going to expand, or the war with Spain in the late 19th century is going to expand American holdings into the Caribbean and also the Pacific. So it is a major shift from just being a country to an empire, right? So that will affect that, and you could discuss that there. Maybe that when you take on this mantle of empire, you are also going to now be responsible for people who are culturally different from you, racially different from you, speak different languages, have different livelihoods, different morals, different ways of thinking, really. So you could discuss that as part of how does that affect the meaning, okay? And then we go into prior knowledge. Again, here is where I would discuss maybe the Spanish-American War, what you know about British imperialism, if you know a lot about it, what you know about necessarily American imperialism, colonization, all of that could be tied into prior knowledge. And again, prior knowledge is anything that we've talked about in class or anything you can find in the textbook. Okay, you can put that in as prior knowledge, but no Google searches. I don't care what Google knows about it. I want to know what you know about it, right? And moving on to audience. Now, this is a poem, and he published it. So we can deduce from that that his audience is the reading public. But as you read through it, probably not meant for native peoples to read of anywhere, Aboriginal peoples, because it is quite racist, right? Quite derogatory towards people who are not white men, right? So you would put that in there for audience. Reason. Now, why did he write it? And this is a good question. But again, it's a poem, so it's a piece of art. So this one is more kind of abstract, right? Why do artists create? That's a good question. Sometimes artists don't even know. But a lot of time they create to demonstrate what they see, right? Or what's happening during this time period. And if we read through this, Rudyard Kipling is saying go out there and as an imperialist nation, you're going to go out there, you're going to send lots of men out there for almost their entire lives. They're going to be trying to build infrastructure in an area that's unfriendly to them. They're going to be trying to educate people. They're going to be trying to colonize, but he doesn't use that word, people, and for what? Right? He says at the end of the day, if we go down here, right, people are going to die doing this. You're going to build roads, ports. They're going to blame you. And they're going to hate you, right? And they're going to ask you why you brought them from bondage, right? It's going to be thankless, and your peers will judge you for it, right? So you think you're going out and doing all this great, wonderful thing for a country or a territory that is, in his mind, not as civilized as you or not as industrialized as the nation that you are. And they're not going to thank you for it. It's going to be thankless. They're going to hate you, and they want to know why you want to change them, right? And that's what he's talking about there. So his reason is probably to show how the difference between what we think we're doing as an imperialist nation and the Aboriginal people think that you're doing, right? The main idea you can summarize there. You can summarize what he's saying, right? And then the significance. Why is the source important? So what, right? Why are we still looking at this poem? Well, it tells us several things. The first of which, it tells us that imperialist ideas, specifically racially motivated ideas, were very prevalent. He's talking about imperialism. He's talking about what the British and the Americans are doing, especially with regards to like the Caribbean island and the Philippines, Puerto Rico, Cuba. He's describing how it's thankless, but he's also, I mean, he's not shy about calling them people in bondage. He's not shy in calling them, here we go, sloth, which is laziness, heathens, right? He's saying you're going to ease their famine, help them with their sickness, their diseases. You're going to help them make money, but they're not going to thank you for it, right? These people are half devil and half child, right? So he's using some very strong terminology to denote Aboriginal peoples, right? And this Aboriginal is just a general term for anybody who's native to a land, like the Aborigines in Australia, the Maori in New Zealand, Native Americans, the Incas, Aztecs, right? The variety of tribes in South America, the Polynesians in the Pacific, right? Southeast Asians, etc. So it's significant that we know the mindset. Like, this is what they actually thought they were doing. Okay, they actually thought that they were like bringing these people into the light. But then again, what light? The light that you think they're supposed to have, right? And then we go to that. You could also discuss kind of the flip side of this coin, and that is, as a nation with a lot of wealth, right? Because even then we had a lot of wealth. And right now may not seem like it, but we are very wealthy, and a lot of the prosperity we take for granted, and the security that we take a lot of that for granted. Is it not right that wealthy countries try to help countries in famine? For example, Yemen right now is experiencing severe famine due to an ongoing war that's there. Should we not try to get them food? Should we allow these people to die of starvation in a world where we have all this money, millions and millions, billions, trillions of dollars, right? Is it not right that we try to stop genocide of the Uyghur Muslims in China? So significance of this is important for the time period. We need to kind of understand how imperialists thought, and this is a very good example of how they thought. But you could also discuss that it's also kind of ingrained in religion, charity, and good works that you assist people when they are in dire needs. I think the difference there and what you might want to put in there, if you were going to do this one again, this is an example, would be to make clear that there's a difference between imperialism and colonization and aid, right? Help. We are not interested in dominating Yemen. We're not interested in colonizing Yemen, but we should probably help them get some food, right? But again, that's a whole nother issue dealing with our friends, the Saudis. But these are the kind of things imperialism brings up, and this poem brings up. Okay, so this is how I would analyze this document. Do you guys have any questions about that?
No.
Okay. Yes. Dawkins. Asada. Oh, maybe it was a mistake. Okay. So that's how to do that. And again, this is the Apart's guide. It's available for you on Blackboard. Let me stop sharing that real quick. And share Blackboard with you. Okay, so hopefully you can see it. You'll be able to see it in a minute here. There we go. Okay, so the assignment is here under assignments, right? This is the PDF with the documents you have to choose from. Click on that and it'll give you a series of documents. You only have to do one. You type out your answers to all the questions in this guide. And then when you click on here, it should ask you to, yeah, there you go. You're going to submit, right? So you upload a file and hit submit, sorry, and then it will dump it into Blackboard for you, okay? So that is due on Monday. Then if you go to MindTap, right, you can get into the course there, but also Chapter 16, Interactive Story Reflection is right here, okay? So that is all the stuff that is due on Monday. Now let's get into Chapter 16. I'm going to start by showing you, oh, why can't I just stop it? There we go. A video. Yes. Question?
So, yeah, I have a question. So the Apartas, I hope I'm saying that correctly, and Chapter 16 are both due Monday?
Correct.
Okay, I was just making sure. Thank you.
And you can always text that Google number if you have questions, or hit the email. Email's fast too. But the syllabus has everything on it. Everything that's ever going to be due is on the syllabus, and it gives you the date. Right? So if you have that one going, you can avoid a lot of that back and forth. All right, so I'm going to pause the recording because I'm going to show you the beginning of a video called The Men Who Built America. And this brings us into Chapter 16 with industrialization. Obviously, we're probably not going to finish it all, but that's okay. You can do the interactive story reflection without having done the entire chapter, and we'll finish it on Monday, hopefully. So let me go ahead and share this with you and get into the. Okay. And we want to, there we go. Again, the closed captioning is on.
Your brain, my effort against your effort. You just competed. That's the way they looked at business. It was the wild, wild west. And by hook or crook, it was just win or lose, and the best win.
He was a tough guy, getting into scraps with other men, beating the hell out of them and knocking them unconscious. That competitive streak and that toughness.
This is
very much
Vanderbilt, by the
defined
way.
His character.
Commodore Vanderbilt.
His single ferry soon becomes a fleet of ships, transporting goods and passengers to every corner of the growing country. Vanderbilt will become so synonymous with shipping, his nickname becomes the Commodore.
I think Vanderbilt recognized that what was going to be important is transporting goods from one place to another. And he had this idea that required infrastructure, and not infrastructure the government was going to provide, but that he was going to provide.
Over the next 40 years, Vanderbilt builds the largest shipping empire in the world. Then, at the peak of his power, just before the Civil War, he does the unthinkable. Work is underway on the first transcontinental railroad, and the Commodore realizes that its completion will transform America, slashing cross-country travel time by months.
Railroads were absolutely liberating because the railroads allowed cheap and efficient transportation from one corner of America to another.
Vanderbilt sees his future. He sells all of his ships and invests everything he has in railroads.
You talk about seeing around corners as an element of success. That's what differentiates a good leader. Not many people have it. Not many people can predict that corner. That is a characteristic of great leaders.
His decision to invest heavily in rail pays off. By the end of the war, Vanderbilt is the richest man in America, with a net worth of over $68 million, the equivalent of $75 billion today. But all that money can't buy his escape from the war's devastation. In the wake of the Civil War, the country mourns publicly, while Vanderbilt does so privately.
The first card is the past, the second, the present, and the third is the future. There has been an unexpected loss. Someone close to you.
My son, George. He died in the war. What about the future?
The chariot. There will be a war.
War's over.
No. Your war is about to begin.
Hey.
Watch, man.
Tormented by the loss of his favorite son, Vanderbilt's empire is more vulnerable than ever before.
For Vanderbilt, this is a great tragedy. He had one son who had that same sense of physical strength and ability, and he had died when he was still quite young. It was deeply troubling for the Commodore.
For years, Vanderbilt groomed George to take over the family business. Now, the Commodore is forced to rely on his less accomplished son, William. I'm making you operations director of the Hudson Railroad. Vanderbilt places William in the midst of negotiations with the owners of a rival railroad.
So name your price.
If you give us your freight year-round, we will give you the privilege of allowing your passengers access into Manhattan for $200,000.
That privilege is not worth $200,000.
Then let us settle on $100,000. I believe that to be a fair and generous offer.
I'm not really interested in your generosity. I'm only interested in getting the best deal for my shareholders. And that does not include handing over $100,000 or even $1.
My father wants only what he believes is right.
The trouble is, your father doesn't know what is right. The old man should be put out to pasture.
The message is clear. The competition no longer sees Vanderbilt as a man to fear.
People are always rooting for very successful people to fail. The day people are not taking shots at you, it means you're not up anymore.
But where they see weakness, the Commodore sees an opportunity to assert his dominance and teach William what it means to be a Vanderbilt.
If they want a war, I'll give them a war.